Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ansible Library. Today, we're just going to be continuing on discussing and talking about some of the books that I've been reading and finishing in the year. So, we're just going to hop straight in. And first for this episode is I read All Systems Red by Martha Wells. And this is the first book of the Murderbot Diaries series. Um, and it's just like it's technically a novella. It won the Hugo Award for novellas and I think a Nebula Award for this story. This has been on my shelf for a while. I've had Network Effect for a while, but I wanted to wait until I read and found this one before I moved on to the sort of bigger novel of hers of Network Effect. But so I finally got around to reading it. I was not disappointed. I see what the hype is. I see why everyone is sort of drawn towards this story and her writing. Basically, it's following this security robots whose job is to protect this group of scientists on this planet that they're surveying and exploring. And he is calls himself Murderbot. Um, and he is become self-aware and has burned out his sort of governorship program, so he cannot be controlled by humans. And he wants to just spend his time consuming media, consuming movies and television and soap operas, and he hates interacting with people, but it's not from a hatred of humanity. It's more because he is a socially awkward and has anxiety and is a flustered individual when he's forced to interact one-on-one with members of this crew that he's supposed to be protecting. And I can relate to that. I can relate to how he feels when he's forced to remove his helmet because he is a cyborg, like from a cloned off of a human body or clone and grown in a tank. And so he has organic components with artificial components mixed in. So he has like a body and a face and everything. And it surprises the crew when they first realize that, oh, there's a face under this mask that he's always wearing. But it gives him such anxiety to like be forced to look people in the eye and not have that barrier of a mask in front of him. And I can relate to that. Like, and so he was just a fun sort of character. And but his job is to protect these people on this planet, and things are going wrong, and there's this other entity on this planet that is purposely deleting data from their maps and trying to sabotage their equipment and wipe them out for some reason we don't know. And he has become so attached to this group of people because they are don't abuse their power over him, because he still is pretending to be, controlled by the humans and automated and everything like that, until eventually they realize that no, he has become self-aware, and just they treat him with respect and with dignity. And so he is determined to not let his humans come to harm. And so it was this fun, just quick read about this sort of character that I can entirely relate to on a lot of levels. And he's dealing with a lot of past issues because he calls himself Murderbot because of previous job he was on before he had, I think it was before he had self-aware and full autonomy. He was malfunction that sort of hijacked him, forced him to kill everyone he ran into, and he ended up killing like 57 people or something. And so he is living with this sort of guilt over this. And but it was just, yeah, it was a quick read. It was a fun little read that didn't go to a lot of like crazy different places and stories with the plot of the story, but the character of Murderbot itself was unique and a lot of fun to read. And next up for this year, I did another audiobook of Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. And it is the first in the Themis Files series. Once again, I enjoyed it a fair bit. I loved the sort of structure of the story where the entire story is told in sort of these one-on-one interviews between characters, or in progress reports, or in scientific file updates or experiment updates and stuff like that. And it's told in sort of this broken narrative of this story, but it paints this such a complete picture that you don't feel like that you're missing any key bits of information or anything outside of these interviews and these reports and things like that. So I enjoyed that formatting of it. But it's about this girl falls in this cave and ends up they find she's been landed in this giant metal hand, and it's discovered that these are all parts of this enormous robot that's been spread out. The parts have been spread out over the earth, and they react to sort of nuclear radioactive material in some way. And so they sort of figure that whoever left these pieces left them in a way that they wouldn't be discovered until humanity reached sort of a technological level. And so it's about this sort of group, this black ops, well, not black ops like military, but like this secret government organization group who you never are quite sure who they're working for or who their bosses are or who their side they're on, but they are going around collecting this pieces of these robots from around the earth. And you know, it's they're having to sneak into Russia and the Middle East and steal these pieces in the middle of the night, because when they do react to these materials, they react violently, and so there's always like destruction or damage if it's in a populated place. But it was just this interesting story of them building this puzzle, building this piece, and a lot of cool sort of concepts in it and ideas in it. And for the most part, the robot is this humanoid figure, except its legs bend backwards at the knees. And it's almost got these Pacific Rim elements in it, because the people operating the machine, there has to be multiple people operating the robot in tandem and in sync to operate it correctly. And one of the characters has this horrible accident, and the sort of director of this program, against his will, makes them perform an operation on him where it to bend his legs backwards so he has the correct sort of legs for this robot. And it was just this gross sort of idea and this gross concept of how far these individuals are willing to go and not care about the well-being of even the people on their team, to a degree, it seemed like. But there's this hints of greater mystery and greater purpose behind the robot, and a greater sort of history on the earth that's related to these robots that are getting Timbits throughout, and sets up sort of this bigger idea of this bigger galactic story. So I was pretty surprised by it, not having really any expectations going into it, but it was a fun enough listen to, and so I might keep my eyes out for it to add it on my shelf if I can find it somewhere and carry on in the series. But we'll see what happens in the future. And then next that I read was Dune Messiah by Frank Herbert. And as I stated in my New Year, New Me book tag video, this year I'm trying to sort of finish those series I had started and never progressed in, and trying to read the sequels and finish the series and fill those holes in my reading. So I read Dune maybe like 5 years ago, and so I figured it was time. I needed to jump back in. Dune Messiah, we come to Paul 12 years after the first book, and so he has been emperor for 12 years, and his Fremen warriors have conquered the galaxy, and he is the undisputed ruler of the universe at this point. And so he has all the power, and he has defeated all his enemies and everything like that. But it was just this really awesome story still, because he has the prescient vision and he knows the future, and everything, and he's trying to find the correct path to walk in all these different alternative futures, and find the best way, because he never wanted to have this jihad happen and for the death and destruction to be rained on the galaxy in his name. But he's trying to make the least destructive path forward in the path he finds himself on now. And it was something like 60 billion people died in the universe, but he says this was the best sort of outcome that he could guide everyone onto with his prescience visions and stuff. And so it's still like, it's not a good future for the universe, but it could have been way worse apparently. And so just a lot of religion and politics, and running this, like being a religious figurehead to the Fremen and all of this stuff. And there's this individual groups of like the Spacers Guild and the Bene Gesserit, and these oh dang, what are they called? Their real names. They're called sort of like the face dancers. I can't remember their actual name, but they're conspiring and trying to figure out a way to bring him down. If he knows all the futures and stuff, how do they go about bringing him down? They create this clever plan, in my opinion, on a way to bring him down. And the one thing that I was like itching for more is I wanted more sandworm stuff. I wanted more sort of that aspect of being in the desert and using the desert to your advantage and how to survive in the desert. But he is ruler of all of Dune, that he just stays in the city for the most part, and there isn't even one like scene with a sandworm in it. And there's even this whole sort of like background subplot with these conspirators where they end up it's said that they do like capture a sandworm and take it to another planet to try to start the like spice melange ecosystem on that, so that Paul Atreides doesn't control this whole spice in the universe. And I just wanted to see that and read about that. Like, how would you go about capturing a sandworm? Like, what would that look like and what would that take? And I just thought it like I wanted that just sort of for me as a in universe sort of excitement in story, but it wasn't necessary for the story. Like the story was still really well without that sort of action scene in it. But I just thought it would have been fun to see because how would you go about doing that, capturing one of these huge worms? So it was a very good read. I feel like it was a lot shorter, or maybe I just got through it a lot faster because it wasn't as um, there was a lot of ideas and a lot of like concepts and everything in it, but it just felt like since you had the base foundation of Dune, the first book that set all this stuff up, that it was much more easier to digest in a way. And I liked how, like, I really liked the face dancers, and I liked how they were able to like control their muscles so well that they're able to like manipulate their features and their voice and everything. And so they're pretty much shapeshifters and can look like anyone and act like anyone. And I thought that was really cool. And I still like the mentas, like the human computers, since like computers and technology and AI is sort of banned in the universe after the past wars that happened, and how these like mentas function and work. And I liked the conspirators like plan. I thought it was a cool plan on how they were going about defeating Paul. Um, and I liked how it resolved itself. It resolved itself in a good way, and it resolved itself in this clean way, and it resolved itself. The book ended in a way that made me excited to now really read Children of Dune and get to that much more quicker than it took. I'm not going to spend another 5 years between books, but because now I've gotten the ball rolling again, I want to keep that ball rolling. So I was super happy coming back to sort of the Dune universe and exploring it a bit more. So yeah, if you haven't read, if you just stopped at Dune and didn't bother continuing on, I'd recommend giving it a try. It's a different kind of story, but it's got that same depth and world building and everything that Dune is so amazing at. That, and it's just fleshing out these other aspects of it in a much deeper way. So yeah, I'd totally say I keep on reading it, and I'm going to keep on reading the series, and I'll see how far I get in it until I've sort of lost interest. But so far, it's looking good. And then last for this episode, I had read Shards of Honor by Lois McMaster Bujold. I did it. I kept my promise. I said I was going to start reading her this year. Um, and I've owned so many books out of that Vorkosigan Saga that I've been picking up over the years, and it just became intimidated by starting such a vast sort of series. And I kept hearing things about the series and hearing how it can get uh, surprisingly dark at time, and hearing how she's an amazing writer and setting up this universe and this rules of the universe and stuff. So I did it. I finally started it, and I was not disappointed. It was not what I was expecting. It's true. It wasn't what I was expecting. Um, and but the main character, Cordelia, I thought she was an amazing character. I thought she was an incredibly strong and smart character. Uh, and surprise, it's a woman author writing an amazing woman character. So it's done right and it's done well. And Vorkosigan, I can't, what was his first name? Ariel? Uh, Might be wrong about that, so don't hate me if I am. But I thought he was a great character, and just like his honor is everything to him. And so I was happy with the two main characters in it. And I was a bit sort of confused at first because it does just start and it just jumps straight into this action where Cordelia's on this. She's part of the Benton exploration surveying team, and she's a captain of the ship, and they're exploring this planet. And it immediately starts out, her whole team is wiped out and killed, and her camp is destroyed, and she gets attacked and knocked out, falls down this cliff, and her and this one member of her crew who took this like disruptor beam to the head, so he's like brain damaged and can't function, run into Vorkosigan, who's been abandoned by his crew, and an attempted mutiny has happened on his crew. And so they're working together, making their way through this planet to get to this sort of medical supply cache that he can send a message to his loyal soldiers and sort of resolve himself. And so, but it immediately jumps into this world and this environment and two factions of this war and everything. And it just felt like, did I miss something? Did I miss a book? Was there something before this? Because this was the first of her publication order for the series, but it just felt like there was no preamble, no like setup of the world or anything. It just jumped right in. And so I was a little like confused at first, but I loved it. I loved how it just jumped right in. And then there were so many times in the book that I thought I knew what the story was going to be, but then it would flip the script on me and it would turn into this sort of other story. And I thought I had it pegged. Oh, okay, this is what it's going to be from this point on. Like uh, pretty early on in the book, like Vorkosigan proposes to Cordelia, and after this like ordeal they have on the planet, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a story about maybe they are secretly married, but they're on opposite sides of these like force or these governments on in this galaxy, and it's going to be have to be kept a secret. And I figured, okay, it's going to go that way, and then it immediately, nope, that's not it, and it immediately turns into this other story where it's the same characters and they're fighting on the opposite sides of this war, and there's still that connection they have, but it's gone this totally different direction. And it it was all really well written, and it all was like a lot of fun, and there was a lot of like humor and lightheartedness in it. But then it just got to this one chapter, and it got incredibly dark, incredibly fast, and like Cordelia's captured and she's almost like brutally tortured and brutally raped, and it's just this like horrible scene that ends in this like super violent thing. and so it just sort of caught me off guard, but I'm like, oh, this is what I've been hearing. Like the series has these moments of just like slap you in the face with the darkness of war and the darkness of like these men in this war and stuff. And so it surprised me, but it didn't distract me from the story. And so I really did enjoy her writing, and I really liked how things played out, because there was like 3 or 4 times where I was like, this is a good way this book could end, and I would be satisfied and happy with that. And then it just kept going, and I loved how, like, after the fact, when Cordelia, um, I don't want to give spoilers, but it's going to be hard to talk about without giving a little bit things away. So, um, when she is back on her home planet and stuff, and people assume she underwent this horrible, horrible, horrible experience. And it was a horrible experience, but they think that it was way worse than it actually was. And they think that she has had her brain altered to erase the memories. And she is keeping a secret, but she's keeping a secret for Vorkosigan, and so that it doesn't hurt him and like start this whole new war and everything. And so, but they think she has been brainwashed. And so they're trying to like help her in these psychological groups and with a shrink, but she's trying to keep this other secret and not let this secret get out. But then they think she's a mole now, and so it turns into this whole other like dynamic of the story, which I loved. And I was happy with the ending, and I'm super excited to keep reading on it, on in the series, because I thought it was an amazingly written story. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought her world building was great. I thought the characters were all great. They are sometimes can be really, black and white, and they seem on paper to be this flat character, but then they have such a depth behind them, and the reason behind doing things has depth. And so I really enjoyed it, and yeah, so I'm super happy I got into it, and I can't wait to keep reading on it. And I just want to end with saying, the end of this book, there's a prelude, like an afterwards, and I thought, okay, this is going to be, because the book didn't end on a cliffhanger. It didn't end with like any major threats or returning characters or anything like that. So I thought in this afterwards that, oh, this is going to be when the big villain comes back, and it's, he actually survived or something, and he's going to come back and make trouble for Cordelia and Vorkosigan. But so I was waiting for that to drop, and I was waiting for that twist to happen. But unless I'm missing something from the characters, because it's totally different characters in this afterwards, and it's just about this crew of people on this ship whose job is to go around after these battles and find and collect corpses in space and recover them and clean them up and identify who they were, and send them back home. And it would just ended up, and I was waiting for this twist to happen, or like they discover that the big bad isn't dead or something. They discover something that's going to cause trouble, but it wasn't that. It was just this really like beautiful little story, almost, of just about like the horrors of war and the after effects of war, and how, yeah, it's these two people fighting on this war, but they're just people. They have families, they have stories, and it's just through the eyes of these like a mortician pretty much, and the pilot of this ship, just their experience with recovering these bodies and stuff. I just thought it was like really beautifully written, like a really like emotionally deep sort of ending to this book, and gave it like, it's probably one of my favorite like preludes or afterwards in a book I've read, because it just, unless I'm totally missing something about some of the characters in it or the people they recovered, but it was just this amazing like tribute to, not tribute, but just like window into the horrors of war, and like even after battle's done, there's still these stories to be told, and there's still these characters to experience and things. And so I was super blown away by it, and it just made me like love her as a writer even after this first book. So I can't wait to move on in it. So all you guys who said, and all the recommendations or like the other videos online saying the Vorkosigan Saga, it's been popping up everywhere for me, so I knew I had to start reading it now, and you're all right. Like, it was great. So thank you for giving me that push to start it. So but that's it for today. As I said, there's going to be some other sort of projects in the work, and other sort of series coming out soon. But I still like doing these videos. I still like doing the same sort of things. But so don't be discouraged if things kind of change a little bit, because like, I'm gonna keep doing what I love doing, and I love doing all this, and I love sharing my thoughts on this. So I hope to see you in the next one, and thanks for stopping by.